Good afternoon. Sorry for the technical difficulties so far today. It looks like we had a little issue with Zoom meetings, and it seems to be resolved. Looks like we have people coming in and able to now log in and register. So we should be good to go here, and it looks like our audio is working. So welcome back. I hope everyone had a nice holiday season. Zach Strickland and Brad Ganane joining you for your weekly Sonar Market Insights webinar. We're going to go over a few of the newer functionalities, or maybe things that have come up in the last month or so that we maybe haven't touched on. And then we're going to go over a few of our indices that we'd like you to look at and maybe focus on, maybe that didn't get as much love as we'd like them to get in 2018. So it's a new year. We're gonna give them a shout out and explain them and talk about them today. But I think first things first, we're gonna start with our heat map and a few things that have changed for subscribers that may not quite know, and for those of you that aren't Sonar subscribers yet, may be interested in seeing. So Zach, take it away.
So yeah, we've made a few little minor tweaks to the UI over the last few weeks. Nothing that's going to be, changing your experience dramatically by any means, but there are a few little changes that I think probably make your day a little bit easier when you're using Sonar. One of them is the ability, when you see this hover over now, I think a lot of you probably noticed that you no longer see this big long list of items that shows up, and you can still get that long list if you so choose by just simply clicking on the market. But when you just go in fresh to the map, you can now kind of hover over thing, and it's going to pull up the index that you have selected down here at the bottom. Right now I have the outbound tender market share weekly change pulled up. So what you're seeing there is the outbound tender market share weekly change represented in the map itself. And one little handy dandy kind of thing that I like, I know you enjoy it.
Yeah,
Brad.
the jump to chart that we have.
Yeah, you just click on that thing.
Look at that,
and there you go. So I think it's actually a pretty solid addition, because I know when I get in here and I'm like, well, I don't know what that really means in relation to the overall kind of index history. And another thing that I like to do, just to give another pro tip, if you will, you can also pull this over. Sometimes people don't know that you can do that. And now you can enjoy the chart in all of its glory, just sitting there, and you can see all the history and how that relates. And then simply click on that to close it out, and you can go back to your daily analytics, if you will.
Yes. And I think it looks like you're already on the data set that we want to talk about in a little more detail. I know we tend to focus on volume index and tender rejection percentage and haul index. And the tender market share index, which is of course derived from our volume indexes, is something of interest that we've been talking about off screen or off camera. And we think especially in softer markets, if you will, or down volume times, is an extremely valuable data set. And tell us why, Zach.
Yeah, so this time of year, I think everybody knows it's kind of a lower volume time of year. Most industries kind of slow down in January, February. It doesn't necessarily mean everything goes away. Like, there's still market imbalance that happens specifically in freight. Right now, market share is going to be the index that kind of gives you the quickest insight into that market balance itself, because it is a relative index. And what that means is that all of the markets themselves add up to 100%. So the pie never grows, it never shrinks, it's always 100%. Whereas with the outbound tender volume index, that pie can grow, it can shrink and contract. And so this one's going to give you kind of where the freight is coming out of in relation to the rest of the country. So we all know the market's going to be kind of slower in January, even though we have started off a little bit more aggressively than anticipated this year with some freight volume, which we'll get into here in a bit. But for instance, I can see with some of these dark blues, which indicate a big jump or increase in value over the last 7 days, Detroit had a 0.43% increase in outbound tender market share. Well, let's just click on that right there, and we can get a pretty big picture of what's happening in Detroit right now. And this is significant because you can see Detroit actually has grown quite significantly. And something to note, and this kind of got me the other day, recall that you are in the weekly change in the map and not the actual outbound tender market share. But we can still see that this is one of the biggest jumps in weekly change that the Detroit market has had, indicating that there has been some sort of significant outbound volume increase, more than likely, over the past 7 days. Just to kind of put that in perspective, I'll pull up the OTMS DTW, and you can see, yes, they have gained. I mean, this is a pretty.
This is the actual percent of their market share coming out of the Detroit X market, right? So
Exactly.
1.66%, right?
1.66%, which actually is a pretty sizable chunk of the market. And just to kind of put it in perspective, I'm going to pull up another one of our features that I don't think we've talked about as much, but I know that a lot of people really appreciate, is the tree map. And I'm going to build one of these for you, but just to show you what this is real quick. The tree map for outbound tender market share, it's essentially going to give you like this heat style watch list chart. And what it's doing is it's putting the biggest markets in the bigger rectangles, and it goes from upper left to bottom right. And the green indicates that the value has increased day over day, not week over week. Mm-hmm. This kind of neutral grayish color indicates there's essentially no change. You see Atlanta only dropped 0.1% since yesterday. And then the reds are going to indicate the ones that declined in value day over day. So, and again, these are percentage change, not basis point changes that you're seeing right there. Like 3.5, it didn't, the Dallas market did not drop 3.5 or 350 basis points, which would mean that yesterday, you know, the market was at over 600 or 6.5 or 6.08%.
So is it safe to say, if I'm looking at this, I can get a glimpse or a look into, in kind of a down market, or really in any market, I can get an idea of directional movement of freight volumes?
Exactly. Exactly. So you're going to be able to see with this map, and I'll do that again just because I kind of got ahead of myself. This is going to give you kind of like, here's where I want to focus first. These bigger markets right here are going to tell you they're going to have the biggest impact on nationwide capacity. Those upper left corner markets are going to be ones that actually can change capacity in the United States. If, you know, Ontario and Los Angeles are to blow up, the entire nation is affected. Right. Eventually. Like Atlanta can do the same thing. Joliet, which is Chicago, has that same kind of impact. These are the markets that are going to affect nationwide capacity. So those are important ones to kind of see. Okay, Ontario is starting to shoot up today, went up 1.5%. Simply click on this box to pull up the chart. Again, another new, that's kind of the same add-in that we saw on the map. And it will, you know, allow you to kind of get a quick view of what's going on in Ontario. And Ontario is an important market to know and watch over the coming, I guess, month or so, as we have the tariff kind of pull forward.
And the tree map is just like, it's created from the watch list. So it's just like the scrolling ticker. It's just like the watch list, or the heat map watch list. You can, you know, there's 135 different tiles on this chart right now. So it's a little bit busy there in the bottom right corner and on the right side, but you can customize. So if you only want to look at 10 to 15 markets, you can customize through the watch list.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and build this for you so everybody can see exactly how to make it. So you go down here and you hit Edit Pages, Add Page, and then call it the name that you like the best. And I'm going to go ahead and just edit, and you're going to get a blank screen like this. And then you go over here and hit the plus sign, watch list, and you go to this box here for symbol search. And then I'm just going to scroll through here to market volume insights to find outbound tender market share, because it is a market derivative or market volume derivative. And I'm going to click right here and hit add all. I can obviously go through here and, you know, click off of these if I want to focus on a few markets or whatnot. I can also manually input these in or select them from the drop-down list that you saw. But for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just say add all and go down here to the tree map, select that and hit save. And there is our outbound tender market share tree map watch list. Again, this one's pretty useful this time of year because you're not going to get any of these, market balance becomes more of an issue in the slower season because you're simply not going to get this big amount of freight volume injected into the market in general. Last year was a little bit different. We had some anomalous movements last year, but this year it looks like more of a return to normal, although time will tell if this year is anything like last year. But yeah, that's how you work the outbound tender market share watch list. And there's a lot of green on this map today. And some of these bigger markets, something to watch for sure. Let's see here. So something I kind of wanted to hit on, and I think is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and move into a chart. The big story of the year last year was this Los Angeles kind of third and fourth quarter from push. We've kind of talked about it a lot here at FreightWaves, but I kind of wanted to hit on it. I've had some questions from SONAR users, like how do I get to what you're seeing there? How do I know this? Well, the first thing you do is you kind of have to look at, you start at the top level, you look at the bigger markets first, and then you work your way down.
In bigger markets,
they're going to have LA, Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, if you will, even though it's kind of dead 3/4 of the year. Philadelphia, Harrisburg to an extent, they have their moments. So Los Angeles is one of the most important markets to understand because it takes so long for a carrier to reposition trucks out to that area. The West Coast is very difficult. It is 2 to 3 days to get from Dallas to Los Angeles, regardless of solo or team. So repositioning out there takes a lot of time. So when that market kind of shoots up in volume, carriers have to, find a load in, number one. And if there's no inbound loads, it's going to take them even longer to get over there. But once they get there, then they leave and they have to drive another, more than likely, 1,000 miles to take the load back to Dallas or to Atlanta, to Chicago. A lot of this freight that's coming in from the port is long haul freight. It's this tweener long haul freight that's, yes, some of it does stay in the region for regional distribution, but some of it gets on the rail, moves into the Chicago market, and then moves throughout the East Coast. So we saw this kind of starting to uptick. We saw this volume. We thought we were at peak freight season in June this year. Well, LA kept on going, and then it kept on going some more into November. And it's kind of like this was a gradual movement. Like September hits and the volume kind of starts really ticking up. I'm going to pull up the outbound tender volume index on the newly implemented dual axis just to kind of give that a little exposure, since I don't know if people are going to have remembered that. So the dual axis allows you, I'm just going to go ahead and rehash it. The dual axis gives you this ability to have two dissimilar data points on the same chart. For those of you familiar with Excel, it's like a combo chart. You basically have your primary value axis is over here on the right, and your secondary one is over here on the left. And what that does for you is it allows you to kind of compare two dissimilar data points in their absolute natural state, whereas we had the relative percentage before, which again is going to kind of distort your way of looking at it and the way that your starting point can change the chart and the way it's perceived dramatically. This kind of keeps everything on an even scale. And you can see that LA shoots up and pokes up above the national, tender volume, if you will. So it's moving, kind of against the grain right up through here. It breaks through and kind of leads the market. Whereas the rest of the country's kind of fading out. It's kind of building up.
Yeah.
And that's pretty significant. considering what kind of stuff we're watching moving into 2019. Again, this is one of those things that we now know, having sonar. I'm going to pull up the FreightWaves Baltic Exchange index, and this is the container rate for the spot market going, for a 40-foot container moving from China to North American West Coast. It kind of leads
a lot of the LA Ontario volume data for sure.
Exactly.
4 to 6 weeks will roughly.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and use that combo chart again to kind of illustrate this use case. As we have, I just went ahead and threw over, this is Los Angeles's outbound tender volume. And underneath that is the FreightWaves Baltic Exchange. And you can see there is definitely a relationship there as the market kind of trends up for tender volume and then kind of slides back down. And now it's spiking back up right here at the very end, which is important going into 2019 because we've talked about this before in the way that they've extended the tariff deadline. It would make sense that everybody kind of got all their freight on the boat, pulled it into the country and said, okay, we don't have enough time to order any more to get into the port on time. We're going to go ahead and kind of taper off. We're not going to pull anything else into the port. And wait a minute, Mr. Trump says you've got another 60 days? 60 days to figure things out. And also the Chinese New Year is coming up here in a month. So we're starting to see this kind of uptick again. So give it about 4 weeks. There's definitely a turnaround time here where everybody's kind of assimilating this information and making their decisions. Los Angeles ticks up, FreightWaves Baltic exchange rate ticks up, indicating there's probably a demand for container freight moving into the West Coast right now, which I think will be kind of the story for the first quarter this year.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because when we looked at some of the market share data previously and looking at Ontario and LA, they've seen a drastic drop in their overall market share under the current market conditions. So now seeing FreightWaves tick up, to your point, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch over the next month or so and to see how LA volumes are affected in usually what is a very slow time for LA or Southern California, January, February.
It's extremely slow. Yeah. Like everybody tends to avoid LA and Southern California in January and February for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull off another point just to kind of illustrate this, because I ran into this when I first had the dual axis. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up another ticker here. Oops, typed it in wrong. Or no, I got it right. There we go. So I pulled up the FreightWaves Baltic Exchange, China to North American East Coast, and as you'll notice, it cleared off my other value. That's what happens when you have the dual axis option selected here. When you pick absolute or relative, you can click as many different values as possible. With a dual axis, you want to make sure it's always just 2. But you can see this uptick too on the East Coast as well. So we're seeing inbound port volume kind of pick up, which we would expect to see coming out of the holiday. You can see year over year, things did pick up last year as well. Coming out of the holiday, a lot of this has to do with the fact that we were going into the Chinese New Year and whatnot, but we're in a totally different ball game.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at almost double prices from this time last year. I think.
Yeah, 1462 last year versus 2003 this year. Basically the same thing on the East Coast.
But one thing to note as well is we are looking at
a dual axis.
The values are, even though they mirror each other, they are different.
Yeah, the scale for the green line is over here. So it's 3137 for the FreightWaves to China's North American East Coast. They are not the exact same value. If we wanted to look at them on the same chart, though, we just have to select absolute.
There you go.
Keep in mind that the dual axis is for comparing two dissimilar indices, if you will. They have to have a different denominator to really make it that valuable. Anytime you look at something with similar denominators or similar values, pick the absolute, which is what I would do here for the FreightWaves Baltic. I just wanted to do that one little thing to illustrate kind of for the users, something that I've run into.
Yeah, and as we go into probably the last 5-10 minutes here, and definitely open up for questions as we near the end of the half hour here. I know we have coming out of the Christmas week and the new year. A lot of the add-ons, I would say, within Sonar have kind of been pushed to the next week and coming weeks. So I know we do have a few things on the horizon that we wanted to just kind of briefly mention that our users can expect.
Yeah, over the next week or two, expect there to be some pretty big changes to the UI. More significantly, there is going to be a few more data sets coming through, which we'll talk more about those when they're fully ready. I don't want to go into any details before those are finalized and set in stone. But some of the UI stuff you may notice over the next week or two, before we're able to kind of finally get those out. We'll obviously notify everybody if it's going to affect you significantly, but they are some pretty solid changes upcoming, specifically as it relates to maps and mapping. We're going to get another revamp in there, some additional features, as well as I believe we have maybe a new widget coming.
Ooh.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
The first new widget.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that. We'll go over that too in the webinars, just to make sure everybody's got, as well as look for it in FreightWaves.com release notes. For those of you that enjoy some of the content of this, we still have FreightWaves Now kicking every day at 4 p.m. Please check that out if you are interested in all the analytics that we do. You had your debut the other day.
I had my debut. Yeah. I was immediately booted though.
Yeah.
So we'll see if I get another chance in 2019. I'm not sure. And then also, as I'm sure Zach won't mention it himself, but we do have our market experts. That Zach is one, and his team his team sends out our daily watch to subscribers on the webinar. I know you certainly enjoy looking at that. I believe we have 6 or 7 different topics, from weather, pricing, capacity, overall macroeconomic data, all through the eyes of Sonar, but a nice 10 a.m. daily update, giving you. Certainly, I think it's helpful with the new Sonar users.
Yeah, no, and a lot of what we do there is kind of help train the users on how to look at some of the data sets, because a lot of it is new. We try to address it from all the unique perspectives. The shipper, for those of you out there that don't you kind of identify yourselves as shipper, you're just a company that ships freight. And the carrier, the asset-based carrier, and also the broker. We try to really hone in on those 3 on the tactical daily stuff, but we also have a macroeconomic section and an oil market section for those that are interested in that. Obviously the macro and oil markets kind of tie together for kind of a nice high level overview of what's going on in the economy and the market. We do have a chief economist who is quite stellar, yeah. and our oil market expert is above board. So,
and we have a full-time meteorologist, which someone didn't believe me the other day. But
we do have a full-time meteorologist, and he's pretty fantastic himself. So, and most of those are trying to target the transportation market and transportation industry. So that is another pretty solid added feature.
Yeah. And one last thing, again, if any questions, www.freightwaves.com/sonar, and we do actually have a new website that was launched. So,
do you want to talk about that?
Really just a lot, I would say a lot fancier, if you will. It's right. Yeah, you can access it right through the Knowledge Center. Let's just grab it. You can see all of the data. It's just being kind of displayed differently. There's a little bit more information, videos on different data sets that you can access. You can still access all of our available data sets through our index guide is still available there. But again, this is freightwaves.com/sonar, and this is actually the Knowledge Center. So you'll land on a little bit different landing page, if you will, if you're coming from the URL. But yeah, you can also access this to request a demo or speak with our team if you don't have direct access with someone at FreightWaves so far.
There's a lot of information in here
Yeah.
that I haven't even gone through yet. So
yeah, there's a lot. There's the quick start guide. So there's a lot of new kind of user-friendly updates here that you can access and look at the product releases, which that is you. I think we maybe have one question, and we'll try to grab that and then leave the line open for the next 5 or so minutes if we have anything trickle in. Someone checking if we're going to have the webinar. So looks like we're good. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties. We should be up and rolling full go next week as well.
Hopefully, if Zoom cooperates.
If Zoom cooperates, we'll have no issues. So thanks for being patient with us today. Zach Strickland, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brad. Good night.
We'll see you guys next week at 2:00.